edge of the world with my arms outstretched, and I lay bare my chest tonight. With all my heart, I've come for grace.
Good morning, everyone. Can you please start taking your seats so we can start the program? Welcome to our 2026 Economic Development event. I'm Casey Koenig, Senior Vice President and Chief Lending Officer at the Bank of Prairie Sauk, as well as I have the pleasure of serving on our Chamber Board and Economic Development Committee. On behalf of the Bank and Chamber, welcome and thank you for coming. I'm excited to say that 2026 marks the Bank of Prairie Sauk's 110th anniversary. And the surprising thing is we actually had 110 RSVPs to this event. So thanks for, planning that. We have been committed to serving the Sauk Prairie for over a century. As a locally owned and operated bank, our goal is to keep capital working locally, helping businesses, developers, and families navigate changing rates and seize new opportunities. Our employees are active in our community, volunteering and planning to make Sauk Prairie a great place for us to work and live. We appreciate all your support over these years and look forward to a long, prosperous future in Sauk Prairie. In celebration, we will have a drawing at the very end of the program for 2 $110 gift cards. You need to be present to win, so please stick around. I'd like to also thank Cordelia's Bakery. They provided the cinnamon rolls, the mixing bowl for the muffins and brownies. The coffee is from John Joseph Coffee, and the fruit trays are from Piggly Wiggly. Today, we will be hearing updates from Dr. Stephen Deller on the economic outlook locally and nationally, along with updates on the local housing market by First Weber's Sarah Gaich and Pam Helverson. We will finish up with the Chamber's annual State of the Riverway report, highlighting what our community has accomplished over the past year. And we will finally end with some table talk discussions to help determine what's next for Sauk Prairie. I'd like to once again introduce Dr. Stephen Deller. Dr. Deller is a Vilas Distinguished Achievement Professor and joined the University of Wisconsin-Madison faculty in 1993. He is a professor in the Department of Agriculture and Applied Economics at UW-Madison and a Community Economic Development Specialist within the UW-Madison Division of Extension. His work is in the broad area of community economic development with a focus on smaller communities and rural areas. Dr. Deller's slides are available by scanning the QR code that you will find located on your agenda right in front of you. And now I present to you Dr. Stephen Deller.
Good morning, everyone. Do I need to do anything or? There we go. What's happening to the economy? If you kind of look at the traditional, why is it not advancing? Come on, you can do it. You can do it. There we go.
Got it.
Do it the old-fashioned way. If you look at, excuse me, if you look at the headlines, the news headlines, we're kind of getting a bit of a mixed signal here. Just recently, the data for the gross domestic product came out, and it was actually pretty good. It was pretty robust. But if you look at the job market data, it's not doing nearly as well. So we're getting a bit of a mixed signal here, and that's kind of what the media is picking up on. So I want to kind of walk through that a little bit with you. If you look at real growth in gross domestic product, when I say real growth, what that means is that the effects of inflation have been taken out, okay? And this is going back to the fourth quarter of, what year is that? 2020. So that's kind of coming out of COVID. You can see kind of the recovery. You can see kind of strong growth. You can see that when we get into kind of the Trump administration, there's a little bit of a downtick in that 1 quarter. But yet there's a rebound after that, okay? And really actually pretty strong growth. Now this last estimate of a growth rate of 4.3%, that's a preliminary number. That will be revised. And I'll take side bets on a coffee that this number will probably come down a little bit, okay? But still, this is really strong growth, okay? And it was a bit of a surprise because we were not expecting this high level of a growth rate, okay? But if you look at where the growth is coming from, okay, what parts of the economy are really contributing to this growth in gross domestic product? And what's driving a lot of this is really kind of personal consumption expenditures, okay? Over half of that growth was coming from consumers spending money. Indeed, if you look at kind of the overall, how much, what parts of the economy are contributing the most to gross domestic product, you actually see that it is consumer spending. This number fluctuates a little bit, but it's around 70% of the GDP is driven by our spending in the economy. Okay, we're a consumer-driven economy. Okay, now, the question that we've got, that when we look at this, is that you look at who is doing the spending. And what this is that this is spending by households broken up by income categories. We basically kind of quartile, broken up into 4 groups, from the lowest income households to the highest income households. And you can see where a lot of that growth is coming from. It's coming from the higher income households. Indeed, there was a recent study by Moody's Analytics that found that the top 10% of US households now account for about half of all consumer spending. That's a record high. In essence, what's driving the growth in the US economy right now is the highest income households because they're spending money, okay? Now, that raises a couple of questions, okay? Well, before I get to the questions, one of the phrases that has been picked up in the media now is this notion of what's called a K-curve. And it's kind of talking about in terms of what happens, who benefits when we start to come out of an economic shock. So suppose, this is kind of a hypothetical kind of classroom type graphic here. But suppose that we're moving along and there's some kind of economic shock, like COVID, and we go into a recession, okay? And then when we start to come out of that recession, what does that recovery look like? And this notion of the K-curve is that there's some people that come out of the economy, there are some segments of the economy that come out relatively strong, and there are other segments that kind of lag behind. Now, what are they made up of? If you look at, come on. The sectors that come out strong tend to be technologies that are, sectors that are technology driven, financial services, highly skilled occupations, and higher income. So those types of sectors are the ones that kind of recover quickly, okay? Now the sectors that tend to kind of lag behind and do a little bit slower, come on, tend to be things like farming, personal services, lower skilled occupations, and lower educated, okay? So there's this disconnect in terms of how we're recovering from the COVID shock. There are some sectors of the economy that are doing very well, thank you very much, and there are some sectors of the economy that are still struggling. Now that's not unique to COVID. Now this raises 2 questions. Is the widening income gap, right, distorting traditional measures of economic performance? And what I mean by this is that this is a measure of, it's called a Gini coefficient. What this is looking at is really kind of the income, it's looking at the shape or the distribution of income, okay? A Gini coefficient that is relatively small essentially says that you've got a large middle class, okay? And the tails of the distribution are not that big, okay? You got a rising middle class and it's kind of dominated by the middle class, okay? For years, that's what the data had showed, is that we'd seen a growth in the middle class. And then starting in about the 1970s, that kind of reversed. And we're seeing what's happening is that we're seeing kind of a hollowing out of the middle, if you will. We're seeing growth in kind of the lower end, and we're seeing growth in the higher income, particularly the ones that are really way out there, the Jeff Bezos of the world, the Elon Musk of the world. They're kind of dragging it out. So that K-curve, we're starting to see that increasingly in our data. And we're seeing it in terms of how people are spending their money and what's driving the economy. So what's driving the economy to a large extent are those high-income households. Okay, now is that a good thing or is that a bad thing? Something that we need to be thinking about. Okay? Now the question is, now this is another study that just came out a couple of months ago, is the number of folks that are living paycheck to paycheck has really kind of exploded. The folks that are kind of in that lower end of the spectrum, they're really not benefiting. How many of you have heard kind of the discussion right now, one of the political discussions right now is around affordability? Okay? This is really kind of that lower, that second half of that K, is that they're really starting to struggle with affordability, particularly when it comes to things like housing. Okay, housing affordability has become a really serious issue. And that's one of the reasons that we want to kind of talk about the housing situation with Pam and Sarah a little bit later, okay? How many of you are kind of think that, you know, housing in the area is really kind of affordable and cheap and that's not an issue? Okay, it is an issue. My wife and I just went shopping the other day. We were looking at maybe making Italian beef sandwich. I'm from Chicago. I like Italian beefs. When was the last time you went in and looked at the price of beef? Oh my God. Guess what? We're not having Italian beefs. Okay? This issue is really becoming, it's almost becoming unsustainable. And that's the question that we're having. Now, the issue in terms of the economy is that a lot of times when we look at employment and income and GDP, we're kind of looking at an average. Okay? That average is moving up. But is that average being driven by those very high income households and very high income sectors? Is it masking what's really happening to the US economy? That's the question. I don't have a definitive answer. The second question is what's driving this strong growth right now? Okay? There's a concern or there's an argument that the explosion in artificial intelligence right now might be distorting what's really happening to the underlying economy. Any of you remember the dot-com bubble? Old enough to remember that? When the internet first got really popular, browsers, people started using the internet, what happened? There was this surge of investment in internet-based companies, dot-com companies. There's irrational exuberance around investment in dot-com companies, internet-based companies. And then what happened? Pop. Okay? There was a period there where the economy was looking really good because of the strength in these new internet-based companies. The market went through a correction. When the market went through a correction, did that mean that the internet suddenly became irrelevant? No. The market just simply overreacted to it. Okay? The concern is, are we repeating history around AI? Okay? AI is not going to go away. Okay? AI is going to have the same kind of structural shift that the internet had 30 years ago. But are we seeing the same thing right now with AI that we saw with the advent of the internet? That's the question. Okay? Any of you following the debate going on in DeForest? That's, yeah, it's almost, I see a lot of the dot-com repeating itself. I hope I'm wrong, but this is actually, there are some folks that are really spent a lot of time worrying about the markets and are worried that perhaps this investment and valuation in AI is, big tech stocks account for a disproportionate share of recent market equity performance, the risk creating the appearance of a strong market despite weakness in other sectors in the labor market. Okay, so is the investments in AI the surge in AI making GDP look artificially good, and is it making the stock market look artificially good? That's a question. Okay? I don't have an answer to that, but this is something that we need to be thinking about. Why did that GDP number come in so strong? Is this possibly why? Okay? Now, if you look at the sources, this is the change in GDP over a year. So this is third quarter 2024 to third quarter 2025, because that most recent number is the third quarter of 2025. Look at where a lot of that growth is coming from. It's coming from investment in software development, that's AI, and it's coming from information processing equipment, that's the data centers. Okay? So a lot of the growth is coming from AI and AI-related activities. That's what the numbers are telling us. Now, is this a bubble that's going to go through a correction, or is this more fundamental? Okay? If you know the answer to that question, please, I'll buy you lunch and tell me the answer. Because I got some money I want to invest or sit on. Okay? Now, what about employment? Okay? I apologize for scaling on the bottom there. That's monthly data going back to January of 2023 up to December of 2025. Okay? Now, if you look at the average monthly gain in employment between January of 23 up through December of 2024, it's about 191,000 jobs per month. Now, some of that's the recovery from COVID. Okay, I'll grant you that. But that's pretty stable growth there. Now, over the past year, from January 2025 to December of 2025, the average has been just below 50,000 jobs. Okay? The job market is we're still generating jobs, but at a much slower pace than what we had been. Okay? This is the same data, but just in a different format. Okay, so you can see those changes a little bit in a little bit easier way. There is the 1 month, or there's a couple of months where there's an actual decline, but notice that the job market is not performing to the same extent as gross domestic product. That's why economists are kind of scratching their head, because these things kind of tend to move together. Okay? So the job market is essentially sending a signal that, the economy is slowing down. Okay? This is the headlines from the State Journal from a couple of days ago. Okay? The sluggish hiring process has closed out the year. Okay? Now, I've shared this with you before. This is referred to as the JOLTS data. Don't ask me what JOLTS stands for. But what this is looking at is, and this is for the US, is the number of job openings, right, which is what color is that? That's kind of the blue line. And the number of unemployed, that's the orange line. And then the ratio of the two, the number of openings to the unemployment ratio, or the unemployment level of unemployment, that's the black dash line. Okay, notice that from January 2011 up until about the beginning of 2018, the number of unemployed was higher than the number of job openings. We had a surplus of labor. That ratio is below 1. Okay? Now, starting in about 2017, 2018, suddenly the number of job openings was greater than the number of people that were unemployed. Okay? We're entering into a labor shortage situation. That ratio goes above 1. And then COVID happens. Okay? And then COVID gets messy. Should almost just take COVID out. Okay? But coming out of COVID, there was a real labor shortage. But that wasn't new. It was supercharged because of what happened with COVID. Okay, but what's the most recent data for the US? Notice that that ratio is really close to 1. That's about where we would want it to be. That means that the number of job openings and the number of unemployed people that are looking for work is about 1 to 1. That's what we want. Okay? So from the national economy perspective, that's about where we want it. Okay? Now, what about Wisconsin? Now, this only goes up to July of 2025. All right, so this is already getting a little bit dated. But look at the labor shortage for Wisconsin. It started a little bit sooner than the US, okay? We're still experiencing a labor shortage. We still have more job openings than we have people to fill those jobs in the state of Wisconsin, okay? The labor shortage, the structural labor shortage that we're facing now is not new. So 2 pieces of information. One is Wisconsin still has a labor shortage, but the national economy seems to be kind of hitting about where we would want it to be, okay? So the job market, from a national perspective, is kind of cooling off a little bit. Now, there is one other piece of data. Oops, I went too far. Hang on. This goes up to December of 2025. Okay, so this is really current data. This is the number of job postings on Indeed. Okay, and this is the Wisconsin index. Okay, you can see the effects, the job growth. You can see it kind of slowing down. Well, the reason I'm sharing this with you is that if you look at the last several months, it's kind of stabilized. Okay, we're not seeing a decline in the number of job openings, and we're not seeing an increase in the number of job openings. It's kind of stabilized. Now, what we're essentially thinking is that the labor market has kind of gone into a bit of a stall period. Okay? We're not seeing a whole lot of new job openings. Okay? But we're not seeing a whole lot of folks unemployed. Okay? A lot of businesses have kind of gone into a let's wait and see mode. A lot of businesses are reluctant to lay people off because they remember the labor shortages of before. So let's just hold on to our workers for now. Are we adding workers? Not necessarily, because we're not sure what's happening to the economy. Are we laying workers off? No, we really don't want to do that. So the labor market has kind of gone into this pause period. Okay? And that kind of helps us understand what's happening to the labor market picture. Okay? Now, I started to, when I was putting this presentation, come on, you can do it. There we go. I started to put together an economic profile of Sauk County. And I realized that the Department of Workforce Development actually does a really nice job. So if you go to the Department of Workforce Development and look up their county economic profiles, you can download these. And they do a really, really nice job. Okay? So I thought I'm not going to replicate what they do. I want to talk about other stuff. Okay? So if you really want information on what's happening to the Sauk County economy, go to Workforce Development and you can look up their economic profiles. Okay? Now, what about the unemployment rate? Okay? The unemployment rate, again, you can see COVID. There are 2 things that I want you to kind of take away from this. One is that Wisconsin and Sauk County historically have low unemployment rates. We have rates historically that are below the national average, and that's been true for years. Okay? Wisconsinites like to work. Okay? The second point here is that look at kind of the average unemployment rate in Sauk County. That's the black line. It's kind of around 2%. It's bumping just above 2%. Okay? Now, will the unemployment rate ever hit 0? No, because there's always churn in the economy. Okay? It's what economists refer to as the natural rate of unemployment. Okay? There's always going to be businesses that are opening and closing and expanding, contracting. That's just the natural churn of the economy. There will always be folks that are unemployed. Now, what is the natural rate of unemployment? I've said this before. You put 10 economists in the room, ask them a question, you're going to get 20 different answers. Okay? But there's a general consensus. Below 3%, you got a labor shortage. Some say, no, it should be 4%. Either way, if you've got an unemployment rate consistently at around 2%, you've got a labor shortage. Sauk County is experiencing a labor shortage. I don't need the JOLTS data to tell you that for Sauk County. You've got a labor shortage. And that's been showing up in the data for a very long period of time. Okay? This is just the more current data. And you can see the Wisconsin and the US data is seasonally adjusted. The Sauk County data is not seasonally adjusted, so I kind of took a moving average. So that kind of wave you're seeing is kind of seasonality in the data. Okay, so don't read anything into that, except for the really low rate of unemployment, and it's lower than Wisconsin, and Wisconsin is always lower than the US. Okay, now what about the population employment ratio? I've shared this with you before, and this is a simple indicator, and what it's doing is it's simply taking the population and dividing it by the number of jobs and tracking it over time. This goes back to 1969. And notice that over time, that ratio has been declining. What that means is that we're generating more jobs than we are people. Okay? Now, what has allowed us to be able to do that, to support that ability? We're generating more jobs than we have people. Well, it's what's happening to the labor force participation rate. During the 1970s and 1980s, what pool of labor started entering the labor force in droves? Women. Okay? We were able to sustain that because of women entering the labor force. But notice how it's kind of, we've tapped that pool out. Okay? But we're still generating. Now, what about Sauk County? I've looked at the growth in population and the growth in employment. What's happening with Sauk County is that population is growing at a reasonable rate. Population in Sauk County is growing at about the same rate as employment. Okay? So it's not that we're not having job growth in Sauk County, it's just that we're seeing a greater population growth in Sauk County. And I'll get into why I think that might be the case. Okay? Now this is labor force participation rates. Notice that this is going back to 1976, that upward trend, that's women entering the labor force. And then it peaked, and now it's declining. Okay? Before I get into why I think it might be declining, notice that the Wisconsin labor force participation rate is higher than the national average. Just like the unemployment rate, Wisconsin is historically below the national average. Labor force participation rate is historically above the national average. Wisconsinites like to work. Okay? Now, why might that be trending downward? Okay, why is it trending downwards? One is an aging population. Baby boomers are finally starting to retire. Okay? And what's happening with this is that they're bringing younger spouses out of the labor market. Okay? So it's the baby boomers retiring, and they're bringing their younger spouses, sometimes younger spouses, out of the labor market. Okay? So that's one thing that's happening. Second thing is increased schooling. Okay, so at one end of the age distribution, you got the baby boomers retiring and leaving the labor market. And at the other end, you have younger folks that are staying in school longer. They're going to school and they're staying in school longer. Okay, now we joke with our graduate program, when the economy is doing really well, guess what happens to the application pool of for our graduate program? It tends to go down. So when we need to goose our graduate program, we need a good recession. Okay, because when the recession hits, guess what? Kids decide, well, young adults decide, I'm going to keep them in school. Okay, but what's happening long term, remember that K-curve? Okay, the folks that tend to benefit tend to be more highly educated. There's this whole debate now about whether or not the level of student debt is higher education worth it, given higher levels of debt? Now, that's a very personal decision to make. But the economics is that higher education more than pays for itself over the long term. Okay? Care responsibilities, particularly for women. Okay? And this is occurring at both ends. Increased child care responsibility. One of the issues the Chamber and the community has been working on for years has been access to child care. And now you have a very successful new child care business in operation. You should be applauded for that. Okay? The other end of the spectrum then is elder care. Those baby boomers, guess what? The care of an aging parent tends to fall on who? That adult child. And it tends to be a woman. okay? We're paying a lot of attention to childcare, gaps in childcare, and how that might affect labor markets. We're not paying much attention on access to elder care and how that might affect labor market, okay? Health, disability, and long-term diseases. We're seeing an increase in this, okay? And the disability insurance programs that we have in the country are enabling this to happen. I see this kind of debating in Europe a little bit more so than here, is the disability programs in Europe encouraging people to go on disability and stay on disability? Maybe. Is that happening in the US? Maybe. But that's something that is occurring. Okay? The other thing is that post-COVID is that we are rethinking work-life balance. Okay? There's a whole generation of my kids, my wife and I's kids, that generation, they're really kind of, they came out of COVID, we're kind of really thinking about work-life balance. And that's affecting labor market participation rates, okay? Now, Sauk County, commuting flows. This is, I debated about sharing this because this data is starting to get a little old. This is from the 2016 to 2020 ACS, American Community Survey, thank you, okay? So this is before COVID. But what this is looking at is essentially where do people work, where do they live, and where do they work, okay? In Sauk County, okay, about 75% of the people that live in Sauk County work in Sauk County, okay? There's about 14% that actually commute down to Dane County. Driving up, I think that number should be a lot bigger. And I think post-COVID and looking at what's happening to the housing market, okay, is that we're seeing more and more folks, particularly from Madison and Middleton and even Verona, that are moving into Sauk County and commuting, okay? The point here is that when you think about the labor market for Sauk County in the area, you need to think regionally, okay? You need to think about not just the county boundaries. Indeed, I've shared this with you before. This is a study that Matt Kears did, and what he was looking at is this notion of stretch commuting. Stretch commuting are folks that commute 50 or more miles one way to work, okay? And what this is 2006, we did this annually, so I've just got the two maps here, the most current. We stopped in 2019 because we didn't want COVID. COVID was messing with the data, okay? But look at the number of folks that are stretch commuting. It is exploding. I had a student that was working on her dissertation, and I actually wanted one of her dissertations was to update this. Well, she took a job. She didn't do it. But I would speculate that if we were to update this, the number of folks that are stretch commuting has just exploded even more. Okay, now what does that mean for Sauk County and Sauk City and Prairie du Sac and kind of this part of Sauk County? I think we're seeing increased pressure from the Madison area coming up. Okay. Now what about inflation? We have lots of different measures of inflation. The big one that gets used a lot is the Consumer Price Index. That's kind of the headline news. The Consumer Price Index is actually used a lot because if you get a cost of living adjustment, oftentimes it's based on the Consumer Price Index. Economists really don't like the Consumer Price Index. There's all sorts of problems with it. Indeed, the Federal Reserve Bank, they use the Personal Consumption Expenditure Index. They think that's a better index. So when the Federal Reserve is looking at inflation, they're looking at this number, okay? So for the sake of discussion, I'm going to stick with this number. So this is the inflation rate going back to, how far? Oh, this is 1959, okay? What do you see here? Well, there's a couple things that are going on here. One is that the inflation rate through the 1990s and into the almost all the way up to the COVID period, the inflation rate was really pretty modest. We went through a really long period of time there where inflation was really pretty modest. It wasn't really getting a lot of attention. How many of you remember the economy of the 1970s and early 1980s? Right? You want to talk about inflation. Okay? So this period that we're going through now, take the COVID shock out. COVID was weird. Take that out. The inflation that we're experiencing now, relative to that long term, yeah, it's a little high, but do you remember the 1970s and early 1980s? This is nothing. Okay, but it's still a headline issue. Okay, we are seeing evidence that it's starting to come down, but we still have this affordability issue. Okay, so what we're trying to jibe is this notion of affordability with relatively modest inflation rates. Okay, I think it go back to that K curve, is that it depends on who you ask. Okay, if you're high income, who cares? Okay, but if you're living paycheck to paycheck, which is the vast majority of U.S. households, it matters, and it matters a lot. Okay? This is the more current data. You can see the spike up because of COVID and the shocks of COVID. You can see that it's starting to come back down again. Is it still a little high? Well, yeah, it's above the 2% target that the Federal Reserve Bank has, but from a historical perspective, it's really not that bad, unless you're living paycheck to paycheck. Or you want to buy beef so that you can make some Italian beef sandwiches. Okay? This is kind of, I just wanted to break it out to look at the different sectors. Gasoline and energy goods, that those prices are coming down. Financial services, the costs are going up. You can kind of just look around those different sectors to see what's happening here. Okay, I don't think inflation is that big of an issue personally, but then again, I don't live paycheck to paycheck. If you talk to somebody who's living paycheck to paycheck, you're going to get a very different answer. Okay, so it depends on who you're talking to. Now, the housing market. The one indicator that economists oftentimes refer to, if you want to know what's happening to the economy, look what's happening to the housing market. Okay, because a lot is captured in the housing market. Okay, if the housing market is doing quite well, then that generally means that the local economy is doing well. If the housing market is struggling, that generally means the local economy is doing poorly. Okay, now what this is a price index, all transaction house price index, and it's Sauk County, Wisconsin, the US, and I put Dane County in here for a comparison. This goes back to, how far back does that go? 1985, okay? Well, you can see the first bubble, the bubble that popped that caused the Great Recession, okay? That's the trigger. Now what's happening to housing prices more recently? Okay, it's exploding. This is something that you probably all, you know this, okay? Now the question the economists have is, why is this happening? Okay, is history repeating itself? Is this market going to pop and go through a major correction? Again, if you know the answer to that, I'll buy you lunch and tell me the answer, okay? Now, this is median house sales for Baraboo, Prairie du Sac, Reedsburg, Sauk City, and Spring Green, okay? Looks like a bit of a mess. This is monthly median housing sales through November of 2025. You notice there's a couple of spikes in there. There's a couple of high-end properties that sold. I'm taking those spikes out. Take those spikes out. It looks a little bit messy. There is an upward trend here. Okay? It's really kind of hard to see, but after COVID, that trend picks up a little bit. Maybe to make this a little bit easier, what I did is I computed a 12-month moving average. Okay, so the first 12 months, compute an average. Then slide it up 1 month, compute an average. Then slide it on one, compute an average. What that does is that kind of flattens it out a little bit. So what you can see here is that there are some of these markets, median house prices a little bit higher than some of the other markets. And you can see that kind of upward tick is a little bit more obvious here. What I'm not seeing is that spike up. okay? So what this is saying is that the housing market here is doing relatively well. Now, remember, this is home ownership, so this is home sales. This is not talking about the rental market, okay? Sarah and Pam are going to talk about the rental markets a little bit more. Now, one of the ways that you can look at that, well, is this a heated market? Is this an unheated market? What's going on here? What this is the average sale to list price, okay? So you list the house at a certain price. Does it sell above or below that? If it sells below that, that generally is an indicator that the market's kind of cool, okay? If the sale price is above the list price, that means the market is a little bit hotter, okay? Any of you been in the housing market recently? Have you gotten into a bidding war? Okay, that's when you see that list price going up. Okay, now again, this month-to-month data is kind of hard to see, so I took a moving average. Notice that the housing market from December of 2012 up until coming out of COVID, December 2021, is that the average sale price tended to be below the list price. It went above it. Notice that there's a period there between December of 2021 and up until about March of 2023, other than spring green. Something's happening in spring green I don't understand. But notice that it was above. That's the heated market that was being experienced. Now, what's happened to that ratio? That ratio has dropped back down a little bit. That's an indicator to me of two things. One is the market is starting to kind of get back to normal a little bit, or people got greedy when they put their house on the market and they were asking too much. Okay? Be honest with you. If you're in a really hot market and you're selling your house, don't you think you're going to kind of jack the price up a little bit? Okay? And I think Sarah and Pam can talk to that a little bit. So the indicator here is that the market went through a period of being relatively hot, and now it's kind of getting back to normal a little bit. Okay? This is Madison for comparison. Madison is still a really hot market. Okay? You see the seasonality there? This is the time of the year you want to buy a house. This is not the time of the year you want to sell a house. Okay? Well, duh. It's Wisconsin. Okay? But the Madison housing market is still pretty hot. Now, what does that mean for Sauk County? Okay? What does it mean when commuting sheds are getting bigger? Okay? There's still going to be a lot of pressure from that Madison housing market spilling over into Sauk County, particularly the southern part of Sauk County. Okay? But it's slowing down a little bit. Okay? Now, months of supply. This is an indicator that's used in the real estate market to kind of see how the market is doing. There's a couple. If there's less than a 3-month supply, that's an overheated market. If it's 3 to 4 months supply, that's a seller's market. If it's more than 9 months, it's a distressed market. So what do we got here? Again, that's kind of a mess to see. This is that moving average. That gray shaded area is defined as a overheated market. Notice that period coming out of COVID and still kind of a little bit, there's still a shortage of housing. Although the market's slowing down, it's cooling off a little bit, there's still a bit of a housing shortage here based on the supply of housing. There simply aren't that many houses going out of the market. Okay? Now, let's look to the future. Okay? And I'm going to do a little bit something differently here. What are some of the leading indicators that are kind of being bounced around? I tend to listen to a lot of the business news channels, and you hear a lot of the talking heads. They kind of throw out their favorite leading economic indicator, and some of them get kind of weird. Okay? For example, the lipstick index. What this is essentially saying is that when the economy starts to weaken, consumers will start to cut back on big luxury items. Okay? But there's still a surge on small indulgences like lipstick. I don't know if that's going to be true or not, but it kind of gets you thinking about how people think about spending their money. Okay? Remember, we're a consumer-driven economy. Okay? The men's underwear index. Same idea. Okay, if the economy is going into a week, guess what? Guys tend to, okay? You can start to look at how people are spending their money. And how they're spending their money is an indicator of what's happening to the economy. The ramen noodle index. Okay? How are people spending their money in the grocery store? Okay? What's happening to restaurants? Okay? Are the high-end, what's happening to the sales in the high-end restaurants? What's happening to the sales to the medium-scale restaurants? Okay? There's another one here that I didn't put up here, is sales between Dollar General, Walmart, and Target. If the economy tends to be doing well, what happens to sales at General Dollar? What happens to sales at Target? Goes up. What happens if the economy is doing poorly? Sales at Target tend to tip down. Sales at Dollar General tend to tick up. And then you got Walmart in the middle there, okay? The idea here is that you can look at how people are spending their money and start to get an idea. Fine dining index, same logic. Okay? And this is where a lot of times looking at the quarterly reports of some of these big corporations, you know, if Dollar General comes out tomorrow and says, we had a really great year, according to this, that's saying, ooh, that's a warning flag. If Target comes out and says, ooh, we didn't do so good, ooh, what if Macy's comes out and says, ooh, we had a really good year or we had a really bad year? These are all indicators that we can start to help paint a picture of what's happening to the economy. Okay, a couple of other ones. The divorce or marriage rate index. Economic stress discourages divorce and marriage. Both drop when times are tough due to financial uncertainty. Okay? Used car. Guess what? I'm going to make that car last a little bit longer. I'm going to have repairs done on it a little bit more. Okay? How are people spending their money? RV recreational index. Oh, I could go on and on and on with these things. Okay? Consumer shifts. Do you notice that when economic times, maybe you don't go to Starbucks as much? Okay? Or if you do go to Starbucks, you get regular coffee rather than an expensive latte. Okay? How do consumers spend their money? That's what we're looking at. Okay? Now, leading economic indicators, the actual leading economic indicators. Okay? I really hesitated on this because we got a problem with the data. Anybody remember the government shutdown? Didn't happen. Fake news. Well, guess what? There's a lag in the economic data that we use to do our economic forecasting with. So a lot of our leading economic indicators, we don't have anything newer than September. So what is that? How can we, data that's, 5 months old? Okay, so, maybe a month from now, some of this data will start to get released. So a lot of times when we think about, oh, the government's shutting down, who cares, right? Well, it's stuff like this. It makes my life really hard, okay? Because it's the data that we use. But the idea here is that the leading economic indicators are all kind of trending downward. Okay, they're all kind of pointing that, guess what, the economy is going into a slowdown period. Okay, there's no indication that we're going to go into a recession. That's not what these leading indicators are suggesting. What they are suggesting is that we're going into a slowdown period. Well, what's the job market data telling us? We're going into a slowdown period. What does the GDP numbers tell us? Ugh. Okay. Now, what are some of the different, go back, up, no. There we go. These are the different things that go into the index of leading economic indicators as put out by the Conference Board, okay? Some of these where there's an NA, those are proprietary. The library or the university does not subscribe to this data, so I don't have access to it. The other data is publicly available and you can download it. The first column is the last month's change. Now some of this is August and September. okay, which is kind of dated, okay, because the new data's not out. And then there's a 6-month average change going back. So the farther you go back, if it's green, that's basically indicating, you know, hey, the economy's doing okay. The economy looks like it's going up. So notice that going farther back in time, most of these indicators are green, but as you move more current, they start to flip to red. That's where these indicators are starting to say we're entering a period of slowdown. Okay? Are we going into a recession? No. You can't infer that from this data. Okay? So, summary. The economy is slowing. There is limited evidence that we're going into a recession. Okay? The job market is stalled. It's neither growing nor is it declining. Matt Cares and I think that what this is that businesses remember the troubles of hiring, the labor shortages, they remember the difficulties, and they're really hesitant to lay people off. So they're just going to kind of go into a wait-and-see mode. Okay? The housing market is still strong, but it's showing signs of slowing. It's not overheated. We went through a period there that the housing market was overheated. Okay? It's still a hot market, but it's not overheated. Pam and Sarah can give a little bit more insights on that. Okay? Wisconsin still has a structural labor shortage. Okay? Even if the data only goes through July, even if we had this updated, the most current, I still think Wisconsin would have a structural labor shortage. I think that's why in Wisconsin, businesses are hesitant to lay people off because they're afraid they're going to have a really hard time getting them back. Okay? The benefits of the current economic growth are very uneven. That K-curve, okay? I think that's something that we need to, you see this in terms of the number of folks that are living paycheck to paycheck, the issues around affordability, and the question being that, you know, we got the paycheck to paycheck, that lower part of the K-curve, they're still not recovering, they're still struggling, but that upper part, they're doing fine, and when we look at the average, that average really isn't telling us the story that we needed to tell us. Okay? And I will stop there, and I have no idea how I'm doing on time. I'm doing okay? Questions? Before we go on, Pam and Sarah can talk about the housing market. Yes, sir.
Just wondering if you could speak to the trends with birth rates and then also people immigrating to Wisconsin or moving out of Wisconsin and what you see long-term there as a potential impact to the labor participation rate.
The birth rate. You know, one of the reasons that we have a structural labor shortage is because our birth rate is so low. Okay? I think I've always hesitated to say the problem is we're not having enough babies. And the solution is to have more babies. I've always hesitated on saying, until I was in a meeting with Mark O'Connell, who's the director of the Wisconsin Counties Association. He kind of got up there and said, you know, we're not having enough babies. We need to have more babies. So, oh, Mark can say it, then okay, I can say it. That's 20 years out, but that is a factor. I think if we go into an economic slowdown, the birth rate's probably going to slow down a little bit because of uncertainty. If you're living paycheck to paycheck, you have a lot of student debt, you're just really hesitant to have children. I think we can look at Japan and see what Japan has been going through for the last 20 years, and we're kind of going down that path. So I think it's a problem. It's continuing to be a bit of a problem. In terms of migration, Wisconsin's always been a net out migration state. I think that's changed. But I'm not sure if it's because, if you look at where there's a lot of in-migration coming into the state, take out Madison because of UW-Madison, take that out. It's the southeastern part of the state because Chicago is growing north, and it's up in St. Croix County because the Twin Cities is growing. So we've turned into a net in-migration, but I think it's because of those two phenomenons. But it's, And then there's the other issue is climate migration. And there's a lot of folks that have been talking on the Madison campus about climate migration, is that as the southern states become uninhabitable, what does that mean for Wisconsin? We've kind of scratched our heads on how would we study that? And if you got an idea on how to study that, let us know, because we don't know how to go about that one. We need some good young graduate students to come in and kind of challenge our thinking around that. Other questions or, yes?
You didn't make any reference to foreign or immigration labor, and how does that have an effect on what's going on in our county?
Immigration, and you didn't say what's happening with immigration policy right now and ICE. It's not helping. It's not helping in terms of the construction industry. It's not helping in terms of the recreation and tourism industry. It's not helping with the farming industry. I mean, we can talk about what ICE is doing and what not. I mean, whether, what's happening in Minnesota is good or bad. That's a political discussion. But from an economic perspective, we should be going about this in a more strategic way. The thing is that if you look at the level of deportation under the Clinton and Obama administration, the level of deportation was actually higher than it is now. And it's the way that we're going about it now that is kind of causing a lot of the headlines. And I think we lose sight of the fact that under the Obama and the Clinton administration and the Bush administration, the level of deportation was actually pretty high. But I mean, there's three ways that we can address the labor shortage in Wisconsin. One is have more babies. That's going to take 20 years to play out. The other is to convince people to move to Wisconsin, okay? Climate migration, maybe. The third is immigration. That third option it's not politically viable now. Yes?
What is the impact of baby boomers retiring and dying is one question. And the other question is how AI is displacing people working.
The baby boomers creating a labor shortage. I can remember being of a baby boomer generation, being accused that young folks can't find jobs because those baby boomers won't retire. Now that we're retiring, there's a labor shortage. I think that it's not going to help the labor issue with the baby boomers retiring en masse. The thing is, though, is that a lot of the boomers are not, they're retiring it later, or they're going back to work. They're continuing to work, they're working part-time. So it's not like an on-off switch. It's not clear how that's going to play out. AI is, we could spend all day talking about the ramifications of AI. Is AI a radical technology? Yes, it is. Will AI displace some jobs? Yes, it will. Will AI create employment opportunities in new, different industries? Yes, it will. Okay, the economic historians will always point to whenever there's a radical new technology that's introduced, and there's this kind of Luddite mentality that it's going to cost jobs. The economic history says that, yes, in the transition period, there will be a shift in jobs. There will be a loss of jobs. But the long-term impact is that you will see a growth in employment, okay? Because you see a surge of growth in the economy, and that creates employment opportunities. The question is, who's going to benefit from that? Go back to that K-curve, okay? Go back to educational. Who's going to benefit from AI? People that are able to adapt and use AI are going to come out ahead. The folks that are competing with AI, they're going to lose. So that K-curve just got a little wider, okay? I think that average is going to go up, okay, because that's what economic history tells us. Okay, one last question, and then we got to.
Kind of two of our bigger employment industries being manufacturing and agriculture, and those being like down nationally. It didn't seem to reflect that in economic data, that those pain points in Wisconsin, but is there any fear that with those being so large industries that will have any effect moving forward?
It depends on the nature of the manufacturing, okay, and the nature of farming. Oh, I could go down. The manufacturing, employment in manufacturing has been downward trending for years, and it will continue to downward trend. But manufacturing output has been going up. Why? Because of technology, okay? You go into a modern manufacturing facility, and how much is robotics, okay? We're able to produce more with fewer workers. Now, what does that do to the demand for labor? The labor has to be able to work with that technology, okay? So that K-curve, again, comes into play. Farming is cyclical by its nature. I mean, farmers just have this ingrained. Farmers know that if you have a couple of bad years, you plan for it. You have a couple of good years, you plan for it. Farming runs into a problem so that when we hit, Paul, you can correct me is when you hit 4 down years in a row, 5 down years in a row, that's when we start to run into serious problems. Okay? Now the question is, are we on a downtrend in farming? Okay? The other thing with farming in Wisconsin is that the viability of a farm really depends on the viability of the farm family. Okay? If the farm family is financially stable, the farm can continue to operate even if it's operating at a loss. Where does that farm family financial stability come from? Off-farm employment. So that relationship that rural communities are dependent upon farming, it's kind of flipped. In order to make sure that those farms are stable, the family has to be financially stable, which means off-farm income. So those employment opportunities off-farm become vitally important. Okay? I think a lot of Wisconsin farms are adapting to that. I think a lot of Wisconsin farms are embracing that. Even the big farms still have off-farm income. And the reason's access to health insurance. Okay? It used to be, well, there's an off-farm income because of access to health insurance. Well, now that off-farm income is keeping the family stable, and it's enabling the farm to continue to operate. I don't know if that answered your question or not, but try to. Let's shift gears here and talk a little bit more about the housing market.
She's taking forever because I'm sorry. Yeah.
You just stay on the kids for a little while longer.
Nick, can you help? But how do I then get it to full screen? Okay. Sorry. I can't see. Good?
Okay. Good morning. morning. I'm Sarah Gage with First Weber Prairie to Sac and Pam Halverson, Prairie to Sac. We're a team here in the local area. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about a little bit was how the housing market was in 25, what we're seeing in 26. But for starters, one of the things was, I'm not loud enough? Oh, that's better? Okay, fine. I've never been told I'm not loud enough, Nick. For first-time home buyers, if you have purchased a home as a first-time home buyer, please raise your hand. At any time, not like this year, anytime. Sorry. Ever. Okay, if you were over 20 years old, keep your hand. Everybody keep your hands up. If you are over 20, keep your hand up when you purchased your first home. If you were over 30 when you purchased your first home, raise them high. What if you were over 40 when you purchased your first home? Okay, let's go back to 35. 30? Wow, okay. So we learned this year that the average for the first-time home buyer in 2025 was 38, which is exceptionally high to us considering when I bought my first home in Sauk Prairie, I was 19, and that was on January 30th of 2004. So 22 years ago at 19, and Pam bought her first house
In
1983 at age 22. So that is a huge change in what we have been following. Why we wanted to kind of zone into this was because you guys know that we live in a really unique area in the Sauk Prairie School District. What makes us unique is we are made up of 3 counties. We are Dane County, Columbia, and Sauk County. So pulling entire counties would give us a skewed number because it would include Baraboo, Portage, Madison. Those numbers are obviously not exactly the same as Prairie to Sac. In 2025, we had 269 single-family condo home listings and 214 sales. The median sale price was $419,900, and the median days on market was 13. And the average percent for over asking was actually down 1.12%. And we broke the numbers down into single-family homes as well as condos. The reason we see a jump in this number from March to April tends to happen every year. The homes that were closed in April were more than likely listed in February or March, got their accepted offers in that 30, 45, 60-day window that we're looking at. That's why you see that spike. It also really carried through the summer, and it carried through the winter because we've had some mild winters. That definitely affects our market. The reason we felt it was necessary to put the condo sales in is because we have had some new condo projects come in. We also have a unique condo situation of that we have smaller condos on the lake. We have Water's Edge, Lakeview Estates, we have the newer ones on Water Street. So we have quite a range in there. Even that May number, that wasn't a certain project that made that number higher. It was actually one that was from Kastner all the way to Water's Edge, so there was quite a difference in there. This one here is single family and condo sales in the Sauk Prairie School District. This kind of shows what the numbers were from 2011 until 2025. And in 2025, we had the 269 properties sold that were single family and condos. And as you can see, that's pretty level to where we were in 2020, even 2017. So yes, we did have a hot market. We were in that spike like it was, but we've also really hung steady in our numbers. This one here kind of breaks down into, we get asked a lot what the average price is, considering first-time home buyers, buyers coming into the area. We have a range still of first-time home buyers to people relocating, selling and moving out of the area. So there isn't just one type of buyer that's looking for getting into the Sauk Prairie School District. But you can see that our range where we have the most properties is from 300 to that 450 point. And the bedroom count in those is more in the 3 bedrooms plus is what they're looking for. Regarding new construction in the Sauk Prairie School District, we had 24 new homes built between 24 and 25, and the average price was between $585,000 and $700,000, with a median price per square foot of $311 to $344. We get asked this a lot because we still have young buyers that are coming into the market. We're seeing that they are not as excited about a fixer-upper. So they're like, well, I'm just going to build new. This is more of the realistic number that we have to give them for if they're going to go that route for building first. And Pam's going to talk a little bit about the 2026 projections.
For me?
I will.
Okay. I'm going to share some of the 2026 projections from our Wisconsin Realtor Association and our South Central Wisconsin Multiple Listing Service. We are projected to see an increase in activity in 2026, even though our inventory is slowly increasing, giving buyers more options. But currently, sellers in the Sauk Prairie area are not seeing multiple offers anymore, which means less bidding wars. Interest rates are projected to drop below 6% by the end of 2026, thus improving buyers' purchasing power and affordability. We'll see a pent-up demand from buyers who've been waiting for better conditions to jump into the market and purchase their home. They'll probably be coming out this year, we're hoping. This will increase the demand for more homes, but we still have an inventory shortage, which will encourage, hopefully, homeowners that are locked into those low interest rates to decide to put their houses on the market and move up. Home sales are projected to see a healthy and a more manageable 4 to 6% annual growth of your home value in 2026. The increase in home values is supported by the consistent demand of homes and our ongoing low inventory. The market is influenced by our proximity to Madison and the Madison strong job market. The Highway 12 corridor makes an easy commute. This gives Sauk Prairie a steady demand of buyers that want a good school district, safe community, larger lots, lower home prices than the Madison market, and long-term appreciation of their homes. In summary, the 2026 Sauk Prairie area is expected to be more active than previous years, offering opportunities for both buyers and sellers. Even though our inventory will remain low, we will still see a strong housing market in 2026. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Sarah and I.
That's all we have for you today. Casey's going to come up to kind of keep us on track and go to our small table talk. If anybody has any questions for us after, feel free to reach out to us. We have, oh, it's gone now. Well, we're not hard to find, but there was a QR code there that you can get to or track one of the stuff.
Thank you. All right, before we move on to the State of the Riverway report and then finish up with table talks, I'd like to invite Roxy up here because what I want to do is I want to thank Dr. Deller for all of his years, both Roxy and I, and on behalf of the Bank and Chamber, thank Dr. Deller for all of his years that he has come up and gave this presentation for us. It's been 20 plus years that you've been here, and he's done a lot for the community in providing these, numbers and data to us. So we'd like to present this plaque to you, Dr. Deller, and thank you and appreciate all you've done for us. And I'm doing this because this is his last year, and he is retiring.
We also have a little memento from Sauk Prairie. We thought maybe you could enjoy your retirement.
Some wine to celebrate.
Thank you all very much. Plus 20 years, and I've always enjoyed this, and it's almost become an ability. We can use this event to forecast the weather. Every day that we have this, it's a bad winter day. And this morning, we stayed in tradition. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this.
All right, on to the State of the Riverway report.
Where community connects and opportunity grows. Sauk Prairie, let's build what's next.
In Sauk Prairie, community isn't just where we live, it's who we are. It's the familiar wave on the trail, the warm hello at the cafe, and the hands that build, teach, grow, and serve together. Here, where the river meets rolling hills, we find meaning in simple moments and purpose in a future we shape as one. While the world rushes forward, we remember what's worth holding on to, because here, it's people who define our progress. Sauk Prairie stretches across 16 unique communities, from Prairie du Sac to Merrimack, each rooted in natural beauty and neighborly pride. You won't find gridlock here. You'll find trailheads, open skies, and time to breathe. It's not about what we've left behind. It's about what we've chosen to keep. The land here sustains more than crops. It sustains connection. Farms like Emily and Avery's aren't just businesses, they're legacies. They feed our families, supply our restaurants, and fuel our local economy.
Avery's family has been farming this land for multiple generations, but we started our business Prairie Raised Beef a few years ago because I have a passion for connecting our community to agriculture in a way that allows us to provide products as well as host on-farm events. So during the summer we host farm camps, and then all year long we sell beef directly to our local consumers from our farm.
As a 7th generation on this farm, it means a lot. We've had a lot of family members before us running on the same ground. So it's an honor to be able to continue the legacy on.
We do have a really good relationship with our local FFA chapter and the Ag Ed department, and that allows us to have high school students who are interested in agriculture come to our farm and work. They actually get out of school a little bit early so that they're able to come and work on the farm and get that on-farm experience. We are incredibly proud to be a member of the Sauk Prairie community, and we strive to open our farm gates and our barn doors to have that open dialogue with our community and share the importance of local agriculture, but also to be able to provide products for you.
Their story is one of grit, stewardship, and deep roots. And like so many across our region, they remind us, agriculture isn't just part of our past, it's essential to our future. Because in Sauk Prairie, being rooted in community starts from the ground up. From early childhood through every stage of life, Sauk Prairie is a place where learning never stops. At the heart of our community is a school district that doesn't just educate, it empowers. Whether you're 3 or 83, you belong in the journey of growth. In 2025, we opened the Sauk Prairie Early Learning Center, creating 168 new childcare spots for infants through preschoolers. Built through public-private partnerships and staffed by our school district team, this center helps families find balance and children get the best possible start. Healthcare is evolving too. We're not just treating patients. We're training the caregivers of tomorrow.
We're preparing students for careers that our community needs, right here in Sauk Prairie.
This partnership helps students grow and helps us grow the future of local healthcare.
We're proud that in partnering with Sauk Prairie Healthcare, the school district, in partnership with Madison College, is now able to offer certification in phlebotomy, in specimen processing, and CNA certificates, making it possible for students to leave our high school and go right into family-sustaining careers right here in Sauk Prairie. Again, aligning with jobs and interests that our students already have and workforce needs that our community has had for a long time. We're grateful for this partnership with Sauk Prairie Healthcare and are excited about the future of this program.
As a provider in this community for more than 23 years, I've seen a lot of growth in the Sauk Prairie healthcare area. As a result of that, patients are expecting us to provide more advanced procedures, which we're proud to be able to offer to our patients. Over the past 10 years, our surgical staff has nearly doubled. However, with 6 operating rooms and 2 procedure rooms, we're simply out of space. As a result, we needed to expand. This is about health, growth, and a better future for every patient and for our region.
We are currently standing in one of our 4 planned ORs, and we will give you a tour of our new larger sterile processing department. Each OR is set up to be identical so that we can do any procedure in any room. This is a video monitor that's used for either arthroscopic or laparoscopic cases in our ORs. These are our spotlights that give better visualization to the surgical incision or surgical area. They can be moved to anywhere in the room to where the provider needs them to be located to provide the best visualization. This is our new decontam area. We now have 3 sync lines so that we can process more instruments going through. Each sync now is also ergonomic so that it can move up and down to make sure that the employee who's working there has the right height and adjustment for them. At the end of each line is an ultrasonic machine, which are brand new to this area to help us with additional cleaning after they've gone through manual cleaning. This space is probably double, if not triple, the size of what our current sterile processing area is. Our sterilizer heats up our instruments using steam, and it sterilizes them at whatever setting is required to make sure that they are deemed sterile for the surgical case.
Prairie exteriors and painting isn't just about roofs and siding. They're part of the heartbeat of Sauk Prairie. With over 50 local jobs and more than $100,000 given back through donated labor and community support, they're helping families, schools, and neighbors thrive. Prairie exteriors and painting, where hard work meets hometown heart.
We went from usable square footage that we had about 5,000 approximate square feet. We're a little over 20,000 square feet now. Working with the Village of Sauk City was fantastic. From the get-go, they gave us clear expectations, objectives that had to be met to be able to build here. The Village Planning Commission is very clear on what they'd like. Certainly you have a great community surrounding, whether it's employment and/or opportunities. I don't think you can find a much better spot than Sauk City area.
To meet the needs of our growing workforce, we broke ground on Prairie Fields, a 40-acre, thoughtfully planned neighborhood with apartments, condos, and land space reserved for a future childcare and assisted living facility. And with rent caps on half of the apartment units, we're keeping affordability at the forefront, so teachers, first responders, and young families can live where they work and belong. Our business community is more than storefronts and signs. It's entrepreneurs, mentors, and community builders. They sponsor Little League, mentor students, create jobs, and futures. And they believe, like we do, that economic growth is stronger when everyone rises. From wellness and design to manufacturing and innovation, Sauk Prairie businesses are building something lasting. And in 2025, one of our proudest moments was the opening of the baseball and softball quadplex, a tournament-grade facility already drawing teams from across the Midwest. It's more than a place to play. It's a regional destination, boosting hotels, restaurants, and local shops every weekend. And more than that, it's a source of pride, energy, and togetherness. And now, Culver Community Park has been selected to receive the Outstanding Park Design Award, over $3 million category, at the Wisconsin Park and Recreation Association Conference in February 2026. This prestigious honor reflects Marietta Ryder's vision for what this park could be, a bold idea rooted in passion, collaboration, and the belief that families, residents, and visitors deserved something extraordinary. An idea embraced by the community and realized just a few years later with the opening of this remarkable complex. Growth is good, but shared success? That's even better. Here in Sauk Prairie, we don't move fast for the sake of speed. We move with intention and heart, rooted in our values, driven by our people, and inspired by the promise of what comes next. Because the story of Sauk Prairie isn't finished. It's still being written by all of us. What we choose to build, invest in, and imagine will shape the next chapter. This is Sauk Prairie, where community means connection, where growth means everyone's invited, and where the future, our future, starts with the question, what will we create together next?
And that is the question right there. So we will be putting everybody to work here a little bit. Next here, we'll have you work at your tables to kind of look at what is next for Sauk Prairie. We want your feedback here at the chamber. So you've seen the projects that we have accomplished here over the last year. You've seen some of the issues that Dr. Deller presented, on affordability. And in taking all of this in, I'd like you all to, we have some notepads at the tables and pens, and I want someone to be the note taker, and I want for the next 5 minutes for everybody to kind of talk at your tables and say, hey, what's our vision next 5 to 10 years? What could we use? And after we're all done, you can drop that notepad off at the front so the chamber can review. We will do a little bit of question and answer after talking about some opportunities. So for the next 5 minutes, I'll let you all get to work.
There's new roads in this town. They cut through all the fields that we played in when we were young. And there's new lines around your eyes when you smile in the setting autumn sun. And I'm certainly not the wide-eyed boy with the new guitar in that old photo that you found. But just the same, I still love the way the football game on Friday night echoes through this town. I am home.